Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendricks, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Sensational. How about yourself?
I am tremendous. I had a wonderful weekend without any Premier League football. I managed to watch the AFL Grand Final, the NRL Semi-Final, the Super League Grand Final. I watched some boxing. Yesterday then I watched a bit of rugby. I watched the All Blacks Australia game from the Saturday. So all in all, a successful weekend for me. You being a football journalist, you were obviously most likely covering some of the international bilge that was on at the weekend. Let me start this podcast by asking you your opinion on the news today that Gareth Southgate has left both Trent and Fikayo Tomori out of the squad to face Germany. The Tomori one in particular grinds my gears.
I'm not really sure what's the idea, plan, intent to get back to some sort of ability to win football matches at the moment. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't bother watching the England game. The one against Italy, there's very, very little at stake there. There was much more interesting teams to watch, and I had no expectation of any kind of England big performance or anything like that. It seems to be very, very stagnant at the moment, how they're playing and how they're setting up and how their build-up play is. It's not very interesting to watch, to be quite frank, so I didn't bother. And I'm not very surprised, to be honest, that Trent isn't involved. I think he's, if anything, going to go in the other direction and be a little bit more what he considers to be safe and functional and positionally, whatever you want to call it, in line with how they want to play. So I wouldn't have expected Trent to come in at a moment like this. And to be honest, I couldn't honestly say he deserves to start for England because it's been a really, really dreadful start to the season from him. So if we take, the fact that he's better than most of the other players out of the equation, just in simple form and in terms of international call-ups, if it wasn't a Liverpool player, if it wasn't an England player sort of thing, and we were just looking at it objectively, would you really say that he's done enough to be involved in an international game of any kind of note this season? Probably not.
Should that matter, Karl? Luke Shaw is in the squad. The guy can't get a game at United.
Yeah, that's
Harry
absolutely.
Maguire's been absolutely awful for 18 months. Can't get a game at United.
I completely agree with this. I'm just saying, in Trent's specific case, if it was just about that, then you couldn't really argue the case. But since we know that it's not just down to that, it is not really anything that we can answer because there's no clarity of the situation. There's no real knowledge of what the attempt to do is. We know that Trent's not been a favourite for the last 2-3 years while he should have been, so I didn't expect that to change at all, to be perfectly honest. Tomori, like you say, is probably a bit more of an interesting stroke frustrating one because there are so many defenders, centre-backs in this squad who either don't play, have not been in good form, or have not necessarily shown that they are, at the very least, Champions League calibre at the moment, whether you want to say that's overall ability or form, and I think he's consistently shown that over the last probably 2 years, definitely last season, started this year perfectly fine again as well, so it is a strange one, but I just think that maybe, we've spoken about this before, managers sort of get to a point where they just play those who they are most familiar with, and be that frustrating or safe or whatever word you want to put in there, that's what they turn to over and over again, and it doesn't allow for great progress, and it doesn't allow for a jolt to the system when things are not going well. They try to almost safety their way back to positive results, and I'm not a fan of it, but that's what a lot of them do.
Yeah, I mean, look, England are the four lions. They've got 3 on their shirt and a cowardly one in the dugout, and that is just what it's going to be. And with a bit of luck, they will get through the group stage and then get knocked out in the round of 16, because that's what they deserve. Let's move on. Today we are here to talk about groups E and F in the upcoming World Cup. We have done A and B and C and D in separate podcasts. They came out last week, so go and listen to those. But let's start with Group E, Karl. Spain, Costa Rica, Germany and Japan. Very tough draw for Costa Rica, you'd have to say.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't actually think that this group is as incredible as it sounds, to be honest. I think that the two European nations are below their best right now. Japan, I really like how they play. I don't suppose that they'll go particularly far in the tournament, and we'll discuss obviously now in a bit more depth how we think they'll do in the group stage, but I really like the way that they're set up. They obviously have similar deficiencies to in previous competitions, but Costa Rica, obviously, in terms of the quartet of the minnows and the ones who did not necessarily qualify in outrageously impressive circumstances, I suppose we can say. But I think most of the focus is actually going to be on Germany rather than Spain in this group in terms of when the competition starts and who people are looking at to be really, really good and all that. Because Spain, we kind of know from the last Euros that they're already looking to be in a bit of a transition state. There's a lot of slightly, I'd say, less familiar names compared to previous squads at the moment, and people like, De Gea have been dropped and Thiago not really been involved and all the rest of it. So there's a bit of intrigue there, but I think an acceptance that they're not where they want to be just yet. Whereas Germany, I think it's kind of, people just expect them to be amazing and get to the semi-finals every single time, regardless of anything.
Yeah, I mean, Germany have the pedigree, 4-time winners. And I think there's a lot of their players that are highly thought of that just haven't been in good form for the last year or so. But let's start with the Spanish. So they won Group B in the UEFA phase of the qualifying. They finished with 19 points ahead of Sweden, Greece, Georgia, and Kosovo. It's a decent squad, but it's not a squad that screams tournament winners. And I think there's particular issues with the defensive group. The goalkeepers in the current squad, Unai Simon, who has established himself as the number one, David Raya of Brentford, who, I mean, he's a decent keeper, but there are some quite glaring flaws in his game. And Robert Sanchez, who, for my money, is probably the most overrated goalkeeper in the Premier League. I do like Simon. I just think when you've gone from Casillas and then De Gea and what he was pre-2018 to Unai Simon, I think that is quite a drastic drop-off. Defensively, though, this is where I think there's real problems. Azpilicueta, he's well past his best. Dani Carvajal, well past his best. Jordi Alba, well past his best. Jose Gaya is a decent player. We've talked about him before as somebody one of the top clubs should probably be looking at. Hugo Guillemon's a good player. I prefer him in midfield to centre-back. But the starting centre-back pairing right now is Pau Torres and Eric Garcia. And I just don't think you're winning anything of note with those two. Individually, I'm not keen on Garcia. I do like Torres, but I think he needs a more physical, vocal presence next to him. And I just don't think he's going to get that with Eric Garcia. Now, there is obviously Aymeric Laporte, who when fit, will probably be in the squad. Inigo Martinez might come back into the squad, but they're both left-footers, like Torres, and the balance isn't right. I'd really like to see Pedro Porro get a call-up, the right wing-back from Sporting. I think he's been incredible the last 2.5 years. But other than that, only Reguilon and Marcos Alonso have been called up in the last 12 months, and neither of them are in what you'd call good form.
I have to say, the defence is, like, I would say 3 levels below where it was when Spain were at their peak, which is fine. You don't necessarily expect them to stay where they were at their best for all eternity, but I think that the problem is that it's such an enormous drop-off. I mean, I like Unai Simon. I think he's a decent all-round goalkeeper. I think he can be particularly good going forward in terms of making himself an established Champions League sort of level goalkeeper and all the rest of it. But the real thing about Spain, and you talk about Casillas, was there. It was Casillas, Canizares, Reina. It was Molina. It was loads of them all really, really pushing each other. Just
Victor Valdez?
No, we'll ignore him. But all of them really pushing each other for a spot in the squad. It was so competitive just to be number 2 or number 3 or Barcelona player. So the big thing that they have now is obviously such a huge drop off. I mean, whatever you think about them individually, the fact that these two goalkeepers are playing for Brentford and Brighton, that would never, ever, ever have been the case before. Nobody from Spain's top clubs, like Atletico, obviously a historical club, but you wouldn't say that they're one of the best clubs in Spain by a long shot. So it's a very, very unusual circumstance for them to be in terms of the goalkeepers. And at centre-back, even more so. I mean, you joke about Valdez, but we all know I've never liked Sergio Ramos, but my God, do they miss someone like his presence. It's not the fact that he's, an unbelievably great positional defender or anything like that. It's not about being a Baresi or whatever. It's about kicking everybody else into gear and making sure they're in the right place, being aerially dominant, being able to turn and run with a defender with an attacker when you let them run in behind them. I like Pau Torres as a standalone centre-back, but he needs someone so aggressive beside him and so determined and organised and really, really on the front foot. He's a good second centre-back, but he's nowhere near an elite on his own. And
he's not a bad successor to Piqué. Piqué had Puyol, and then he had Ramos. Now Puyol obviously a much better defender, but like you said, it's that aggression, that leadership, that organisation, that bite, that nastiness that Ramos brought to the team, and Puyol before him. These are all, and Diego Laurente I missed in the squad as well. These are all very cultured centre-backs. They're all very nice players, but there's no bastard among this group, and Spain have always had a bastard at centre-back. You can go back to Nadal, and obviously before him as well, but just in sort of more modern terms, Nadal into Puyol into Ramos. There was always just that bastard there who was happy to boot someone up into the stands if that's what it took.
I would even say, even before they got to that really, really good stage of being, a world-class team, they even had Ivan Helguera, Ivan Campo, both of them would kick you into the stands. Rafael Alcorta, exactly the same. Even at the fullback then, Sergi Barjuan was exactly the same, little and annoying, and Abelardo at the centre as well. But all of them super aggressive, super disciplined and organised, really good technically, but so demanding in terms of the level that everybody else around them had to play at. And they don't have, in that entire back five, really, other than if Carvajal's playing, they don't really have a massive winner in there. I know Jordi Alba has won obviously a lot with Barca, but I've never really seen him as one of the main leaders of the team. I think he's a follower and a little rat, to be perfectly honest. But they don't have, especially in that middle triangle of centre-backs and goalkeeper, anybody who's experienced in winning relentlessly. And that's a big miss for them, I think. They very, very much need, given the relative lack, let's say, of other people who have been in the frame even to be called up, to sort out the midfield. And I think if you are able to get a perfect midfield, then you could rely a little bit less on the centre of the defence needing to be absolutely perfect and give them a little bit of time to form a real partnership and be their own new style of centre-back. But at the minute, the rest of the team is not exactly lighting the place up either, is it? And that's a knock-on effect of the defence being poor, I think.
I agree. And then we can look at the midfield then. You've got Sergio Busquets is 34. This is likely his last international tournament and maybe the last time we see him on a big stage. He's likely to leave Barca in the summer and head for the MLS by all accounts. You've got Marcos Laurente, who's a good player, who I think fooled people into thinking he was a great player when he had that outstanding 2021 season. Scored 13 goals, but notable that he hasn't scored a goal this season or at all last season. You've got Koke, who's, a very good player, but a little bit past his best and starting to show the effects of a career spent under Diego Simeone. I mean, the guy looks like he runs in concrete wellies at times. You've got Gavi, who's absolutely magnificent. There's no doubt about it, but he's 18 years of age. You've got Pedri, who's incredible, but he's 19. Then you've got Rodri, who might be the best holding midfielder on the planet, but is he starting ahead of Busquets? Is he starting with Busquets?
That's a ridiculous decision. I mean, whatever about Luis Enrique. I like him. Luis Enrique as a manager, I like the things that he's done to turn the team around. His insistence on relying on Sergio Busquets as a game-in, game-out starter is verging on perverse at this point, given the rest of the team's regeneration, given the rest of the team's sort of youthfulness and energy in midfield and all that kind of stuff that he's tried to do. And yet that so crucial position is still this guy who, for the most part, embarrasses trees at how still they are. He just cannot turn, he can't run, he can't cover channels anymore. On the ball, obviously, he's still largely exceptional. He cannot cover the ground that this defence, in the state that it is at the minute, needs to. And even as good as Pedri and Gavi are as kids in terms of their maturity and game intelligence and all the rest of it, there's still spaces there behind them because they are very, very young players. And Rodri would feel this so much better, or a double pivot would feel this so much better, but not just continue playing Sergio by himself.
No, I agree. And I mean, if you had two dynamic box-to-box engines next to him, Sergio would be fine, but you don't, and you're not going to because you're Spain, and he's going to get exposed. And that is just, it's going to be a disappointment. He really should have retired from international football after the last World Cup. The last midfielder in the squad then is Carlos Soler, who's a good player, very good player, but likely to just make up a squad place. Those who've been included in the last 12 months but not in this squad, Thiago, don't really understand why he's not in the squad, but he's not a favourite of Luis Enrique and likely won't go to the World Cup. Mikel Moreno, who's been really good for Real Sociedad the last couple of years. Pablo Fornals, been impressive for West Ham. Bryce Mendes, who moved to Sociedad in the summer. Brahim Diaz, I'm not a big fan of it. He's more of a winger than a midfielder, but he's been in the squad the last 12 months. Sergi Roberto, another one who probably should be put out to pasture. And Dani Olmo, who again is more of a final third player. There isn't, among those that have been called up, there isn't really, other than Thiago, there isn't really one that screams at you, I should be in the team. But in all likelihood, none of those will be called up for the tournament. And he will roll with what he's got in the squad right now.
Yeah, I wonder whether Miguel will get back in Merino if Sociedad have a good run and he's playing well, then maybe so. And Dani Olmo should if he's back to full fitness, but that's obviously a big doubt at the moment, so he might miss out just by circumstance as well. It's not an incredible group of midfielders compared to what came before, and I think we probably have to accept that and move on. This isn't the generation that Spain had before. It could be very, very good again if Gavi and Pedri and whoever else become as good as they could be, but at the moment it's like an in-between, isn't it? It's the end of the last ones and the start of the new ones, and they're not quite got that mix quite right yet. But I mean, like I said before, put Rodri in, gives you a really, really good starting point at the very least. And then if you've got, even if it's one of Pedri or Gavi, and then the other one is a more 8 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 instead of a 8 to 9 out of 10, a Koke or a Llorente, depending on need, then I think that Spain's midfield would be pretty well placed, to be honest. It would be not the most athletic necessarily all the time, unless Llorente is in there. It wouldn't necessarily be the speediest in transition play, but you won't get the ball off them very much either. There's still bits to work out. They're nowhere near perfect, and I don't expect them to go ridiculously deep into the tournament, but at least they've got building blocks for the next 2 World Cups probably after this one as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. And I think the same can be said about the attack as well. So you've got Alvaro Morata. You've got Marco Asensio. I'm not really sure how he gets in the Spain squad because the last time he impressed me for Real Madrid was probably 2017. You've got Ferran Torres, who struggles to get games at Barcelona, but he does play well for Spain, and his goal record for Spain is quite good. You've got Jeremy Pino, who's a big big talent who likely will become a star. Borja Iglesias, I'm not a huge fan of. Nico Williams, not that Nico, or this could be Nico. Athletic Bilbao, younger brother of Inaki Williams. He's very talented. Pablo Sarabia, I'm confused as to why he continues to get in the squad. And then others who will probably get a look before the World Cup. Mikel Oyarzabal, for me, he should be in the squad if fit. Brian Hill can't get a game at Spurs, so wouldn't even be considering him. Rodrigo is in, or has started the season quite well for Leeds, but he always flatters to deceive. Ansu Fati, who's probably the most gifted player Spain have now, but obviously the concern is the knee. And then maybe the oddest case of any player right now in world football, Raúl de Tomás, who has always been a bit of a narc, but he did really well at Espanyol. And when they went down, he almost single-handedly carried them back into La Liga. He had a great season in La Liga last year. He wanted to leave. There was a whole bunch of, back and forth. The transfer window closed. He was still an Espanyol player. And then on the 13th of September, it was announced he's moved to Rayo Vallecano and won't be allowed to play any matches for them until January 2023. Rather than just knuckling down at the club he was at and playing and probably securing himself a place in the World Cup squad, I think he's probably harpooned that completely, and I don't imagine he's going to get to go to the World Cup, given he won't have played a single game in 6 months by the time the World Cup starts. And there was all kinds of mad rumours that his agent headbutted the president of Espanyol and all sorts. But, at 27, in his prime, off a great season, I would have made an argument that it should have been him starting for Spain at this World Cup and not Alvaro Morata, because he's just in better form, and I think he's a better player right now. But he's probably going to be out of the mix for this tournament.
Yeah, I think he's probably jettisoned any chances of going, let alone starting. And to be honest, he did have a good year last year for sure. He's a very, I think, a little bit of a one-dimensional number 9. You play him off the shoulder and you let him run and you let him annoy defenders and all the rest of it, but he's not going to contribute hugely to the build-up. I think Spain do benefit more from a Rodrigo more than a Raúl de Tomás, to be honest, even if Rodrigo is not great in front of goal all the time. I think the bigger issue here is that we're discussing distinctly level 2 number 9s here. Like, whether it's Raúl, Rodrigo, Alvaro, they're not anywhere near great number 9s, are they? Morata has the biggest reputation, let's say, because of the clubs that he's played for, but he is wildly inconsistent. He can be very, very good on his day. He can be totally anonymous and actively harmful to your team's chances of winning when he feels like it as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Borja Iglesias goes just to have a bit more of a consistent presence up front. Not necessarily consistently great, but consistent at what he does. There are obviously still calls for people like Iago Aspas to go and he be the sort of the alternative forward, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen now either. So I gotta say, there's so many not good enough players in this squad and around this squad. Sarabia still, what are you doing? Come on, move on. It's just ridiculous that he's still involved. I would probably take one of Adeyemi or Williams just for that extra bit of speed and unpredictability and someone really trying to get themselves in there. Ansu Fati, if he's fit to be a 20-minute player off the bench, has to go, in my opinion. He's not there yet for Barcelona in terms of starting. They're being really, really careful with him, but I would still take him if Spain are willing to do the same sort of thing, not to do what they did with Pedri and Gavi last year and play them in like 12 straight games across 2 tournaments.
Yeah, to paraphrase Rick Pitino, Fernando Torres is not walking through the door. David Villa is not walking through the door. This is what you've got, and it's a far cry from what Spain once had in attack. Alvaro Morata confuses me greatly. He is a distinctly average player, and yet he has played in his career for Real Madrid, Juventus, Real Madrid again, Chelsea, Atletico Madrid, and Juventus, and now Atletico Madrid again. And you can maybe point out 2 impressive seasons that he's ever had. One at Real, and the first year at Juve, where he scored 20 goals. That's it. There's 20 goal seasons. But in league form, his highest contribution was 15 goals. Now, it was in 26 matches, which is a fair turnaround. But I don't understand how it is that top clubs continue to pay large amounts of money to this fella. I mean, he's moved for 15 million to Juventus, back to Real for 25, to Chelsea for 60, to Atletico Madrid for 58. Juve took him on a 1-year loan worth 10 million with an option to buy at 40 million, kept him for another year for a 10 million loan fee, and then just decided they didn't want him and sent him back. And he doesn't warrant it. He's this generation's Mark van Bommel, who was also a distinctly average player, who stayed in the Netherlands till he was 28, then moved to Barcelona, and somehow between the ages of 28 and 35 played for Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and AC Milan. And played quite a lot at Bayern Munich despite being mediocre. There's just these players. I mean, maybe it's because they will do anything the manager asks of them and they work really hard in training or whatever. But the fluff around average players needs to stop. What are your expectations for Spain in this tournament? I do not have them among the teams I think can win it, but I think they can go maybe to the semi-finals if the draw breaks right for them.
Yes, potentially, because I do think that they've got match winners on their day, and it's possible that they get quite a decent run, at least to the quarterfinals. I do think that they will go through the group, but it depends on if they come top or second. I think maybe Spain comes second in this group, and if that's the case, and they face Belgium in the next round, perhaps, let's say, I don't honestly know. I think that would be a coin toss, to be honest. I think that they're favourites against too many of them. I do think they'll go through, but I don't think anything further than the quarters for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. If they win the group, they would likely face, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, maybe Croatia. But if they lose, it's Belgium. I think Belgium should wipe the floor with them. But you just don't know with that Belgium team, as we will discuss. Let's move on past Spain then to Costa Rica, the home of Paulo Wanchope. This isn't a squad littered with high-end talent. There's a couple of players that everybody will be familiar with. Brian Oviedo, formerly of Everton and Sunderland. He's still knocking about. Brian Ruiz, once of Fulham. Always a very elegant, talented player, but never quite managed to put it all together. At 37, this is probably his last hurrah. Brandon Aguilera, who was bought by Nottingham Forest in the summer. Apparently quite a talented player. He's back on loan with Guanacasteca and should be in England next year. Joel Campbell, who I'm not sure actually exists. He was owned by Arsenal for like 40 years.
How is he still only 30?
Yes, and he's got 118 caps, but nobody has ever seen him play football. He was at Arsenal from 2011 to 2018, played 23 league games. He didn't play 23 league games for Arsenal, surely not. He did. He played 40 games for them overall. But he had loans galore. Laurent, Betis, Olympiacos, Villarreal, Sporting, Betis again. None of them went all that well, bar Olympiacos, he was okay. And it's just been a bit of a journeyman career. But I remember when Arsenal signed him and Wenger glowed over him. Absolutely glowed over him and made out like this was the second coming of Thierry Henry. It may be Terry Henry, who might be somebody else from down the road, but certainly not the Frenchman. Outside of them, I'm not really seeing anybody else. Oh, Christian Gamboa is a decent player, the right back from Bochum, but he is injured at the minute. I'm not really sure what to make of them, Karl. They, like you said, they didn't come through in great circumstances. They, out of the CONCACAF group, they hit the playoffs where they played New Zealand, scored after 3 minutes, and then one of the dullest games of football you'll ever see took place. But New Zealand had real reason to be miffed about the outcome because they had a goal disallowed. VAR was involved a couple of times, and I thought VAR got it wrong basically in both big calls, the goal and the red card. What did you make of, or did you watch that? Did you harm yourself by watching that game? And what do you make of this team?
I did watch it, and I only woke up from it about 3 days ago. It was every bit as dull as almost every Costa Rica game I've ever watched in my life. They are not high up on my list of enjoyable teams to watch play. Slightly above Honduras, perhaps, but not by much. Costa Rica are an odd side because they seem sometimes like they could have a bit of flair and invention about them, and a few players that they have had over the years are like technically quite good and quite tricky and look like they would be exciting, but they actually put themselves together as such a combative side, and it's all about like shape first, organisation first, defence first. We'll score a goal and then we'll worry if we have to do anything else afterwards. It's not the most fun thing to watch. The thing I will say for them is, we joke about their qualifying not being particularly good, and it wasn't all that impressive, but they almost got through the normal qualification stage in North and Central America rather than having to go through the playoff. I think it was only goal difference that United States finished above them in the end, but we covered United States in one of the other podcasts and said how unimpressive they have been. So as close as Costa Rica almost got, that's not actually by them being sensational, but rather USMNT being largely dreadful. Costa Rica, either side of the pandemic, went 17 games from mid-2019 to mid-2021 with one win, which doesn't bode too well. Obviously had an upturn in fortunes in the early qualifying rounds and all that kind of thing, and of late they've only had one defeat since November 2021, which one defeat in a year going into the World Cup. If that's what it ends up being, they've got one more game to go. That's pretty good form to be in. But you look at the scorelines and all of them are exactly the same. I haven't watched them all back, but I'd be pretty certain I could go and watch any one of those games and it would be exactly the same as any of the other ones. They are 1-0, 2-1, 2-0, 1-0, 2-1, 1-0, 2-1, 2-2. It's very, very Central America, let's say. Quite a few of the nations around there play in a very similar sort of way. That's how they can compete with the nations who have obviously more resources than them in their qualifying area. And they have a really, really good ethic in terms of the national team identity and really fighting for the shirt and all that kind of thing. We've seen it over and over again with those nations at the World Cup and at other tournaments as well, if you watch them. So I expect that they will be exactly the same as they have been for the last decade. Exactly the same as Honduras have been for the last decade. Exactly the same as El Salvador are, and quite a few of the other teams in that sort of area. Panama and all the rest of them. They are very similar in setup. They're very similar in outlook and in how they define themselves, and I would imagine that, let's say, Spain-Costa Rica in that opening game, for example, you are going to get about 75% possession for Spain, all of it in front of Costa Rica's 8-man defence with just a couple of them running, shuttling side to side. Come and break us down, they'll say, and we'll be happy with a point in the opening game.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and like with a couple of other Central American teams, when things go against them, they do tend to stray beyond the line of what's actually allowed in a game of football and can become overly physical and, potentially end up with 9 men. My expectation, Karl, is that they will finish bottom of this group. I'd be very surprised if anything else is the outcome.
Agree. Shall we move on?
We should move on. Let's go to Germany then. Germany won Group J of European qualifying, 27 points, 9 wins, 1 defeat. North Macedonia, Romania, Armenia, Iceland and Liechtenstein. Not exactly the creme de la creme, but still impressive to rattle off 9 wins. This German squad has some issues, but when you look at it, there's still a lot of great players in it. Manuel Neuer not in the most recent squad, but he will be the starting goalkeeper. The question then is who the backups are. They would have hoped, I think, by now that Marc-Andre ter Stegen would have supplanted Neuer, and he probably should have done a couple of years ago, but he has fallen off. Kevin Trapp, Oliver Baumann, and Bernd Leno are all decent keepers, but again, none of them ever became what they were expected to be. This was meant to be the golden generation of German goalkeeping, with Neuer sort of aging out and then these others coming through behind them. And there's a couple of others, including Timo Horn and Loris Karius, who were expected to be a lot more than they became. But in Manuel Neuer, they do still have one of the 5 best keepers on the planet. Defensively, I like some of the options. For example, I really like David Raum. I think he's a very good left back. Matthias Ginter is an okay centre back. Thilo Kehrer is a decent centre back. Niklas Süle, again, just one that didn't become what he should have been, and the knee injury did him no favours. Benjamin Hendricks looked like he was going to be a star at Leverkusen. The Monaco move was a disaster. He's been okay for Leipzig, but nothing more than that. Armil Bella-Kotchap looks like he might be a star in the making, but he is uncapped as things stand. Robin Gosens is another very good left back. And Nico Slaughterburg is, I think, without question, the best centre-back they have right now. And one that they can build with for the future. Others who aren't in this most recent squad, Antonio Rudiger, who'll likely be in the squad. Lucas Klostermann, who's a good versatile defender, low ceiling, but always a consistent 6 or 7 out of 10. Jonathan Tah, another one that never developed anything close to what he should have become. Robin Koch, who can't stay fit. Christian Gunter, who's a solid run-of-the-mill fullback. And Ridley Baku, who, if he kicked on from the season before last, he would be the automatic starting right back, right wing back, whatever you want. But he hasn't. He's stagnated a little bit. There's talent there, Karl. I'm just not sure that there is a cohesive defence in that group.
Yeah, I probably agree. And I think it's a little bit surprising that they haven't tried a back three at the very least, because a few of those players who are among the better ones have always looked good at club level in a back three. I mean, Hansi Flick is obviously a 4-2-3-1 guy or a 4-3-3 guy. He's, different variations in that midfield triangle at times, but I don't think I've really seen him play a back three ever. I'm not sure. But like Süle in the middle of a back three, fine. Rudiger, obviously, we've seen him on the left of a back three, really good. Ginter's played in the back three. Thilo Kehrer is probably your archetype, not right back. So loads of them would fit, but fine, fair enough. The problem I think that they've got is that a few of those players are not in great form with their clubs at the minute either. Robin Gosens obviously is not really in the team all the time. Antonio Rudiger has not been in the team all the time at Real Madrid. They even played him at left back a little bit in pre-season, which is not where you want to be seeing him. Jonathan Tah, like you say, he looks really good at times. He can go on good runs of form, but then he will just be off a cliff. It's a very, very hit and miss squad. I think that this is a better group of defenders overall than Spain's, for example, if we compare them, because they're in the same group. It will be really interesting to see who they take as like the extra one, if you like, because there's a 26-man squad instead of a 23, so I think that's a good opportunity to take someone like Bella-Kotchap, see if he can develop a partnership with whoever you want as your main starter, if that's Rudiger or if that's Schlotterbeck, who didn't actually start against Hungary the other day. Maybe Süle just on account of the fact he's got a lot of caps. I like Ginter. I quite like him. He's a good organiser. He's not obviously the most physically imposing defender that they could possibly have, but I think he's a good one, maybe as the slightly more of a leader variety than if he has someone who's really aggressive and maybe quick over the ground alongside him as well. I think that obviously the big strength of Germany here is in midfield. They still have maybe the actual starting number 9 to sort out, or the arrangement around the number 9 or whatever, but unlike Spain, where I don't think the midfield is yet sorted out either and doesn't protect the defence, I think Germany's midfield is largely exceptional. That hasn't actually translated to results of a positive nature as yet, but I think if you gave probably almost any nation the opportunity to play a double pivot of Gundogan and Kimmich, they would take it.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think they're both remarkably good players. So you've got those two. You've got, in the current squad, the other midfielders, Kai Havertz, more an attacking midfielder, final third player. Maximilian Arnold of Wolfsburg, who's a solid presence. He's not a spectacular player, but he is solid. He's reliable. Jamal Musiala, obviously more an attacking player and a sensational talent. Jonas Hoffman as a winger, decent player. As a central midfielder, decent player, but nothing to get overly excited about. Leon Goretzka, just form has been an issue for him for probably about 8 months now. You've got Anton Stack of Mainz, who looks a good player, only 23 and sort of had a breakout year last year. Florian Neuhaus was linked with us and then fell off a cliff. Julian Vagel, who's now back, obviously, in the Bundesliga at Mönchengladbach with Neuhaus. When he first went to Dortmund, he looked like he was the natural successor to Busquets at Barcelona. Like he's going to do 2 years there, and then Barca will come and pluck him and bring him in, and that'll be the succession plan. He had a horrendous broken ankle and has never fully recovered from it, has never been the same player. They've got Julian Brand, they've got Julian Draxler, both of whom have never become the players that people expected them to be. I think Draxler in particular has been disappointing. He's now at Benfica. Florian Wirtz, they're crossing everything. I think that he'll be back in time for the World Cup, but it's looking unlikely.
Fast to be anywhere near top form anyway after that.
Yeah, after missing the better part of a year with an ACL tear. I mean, and that is a huge blow because he is sensational. And then Marco Royce obviously will play in a wide role or an attacking midfield role if fit, but he got carted off with an ankle injury, and the hope will be that he's fit because he's missed so many tournaments. And he deserves to at least go to a World Cup and have his moment, but we'll see. So while I agree that the starting midfield pair is outstanding, I do wonder if one of them gets hurt or needs a rest. Unless Goretzka finds his form, the drop-off is going to be significant.
Yeah, I agree. You got people who have fallen away like Emre Can over the last 2 years, who's not even a consideration at the moment. I think if Goretzka was not in a good shape, out of that group, the only one I would really look to do similar sorts of things is Florian Neuhaus. And if he's not fit or he's not in great form, I think I would actually probably, unless they're playing like semi-finals or something like that against a really good side, maybe look at playing Musiala there. He's obviously more attuned to playing the attack-minded role, plays as a 10 when Muller doesn't or comes on for Muller at the moment. I would prefer to see him in the team and Muller pushed out to the right-hand side instead of Hoffman, for example, to get them both in. But I would probably look at Musiala because he's the most quality that they've got. And it is, like you say, a really, really big drop-off otherwise. And I think that there's so much uncertainty about who you start at number 9, whether it's Royce, whether it's Timo Werner, whether it's Kai, whether it's Gnabry. Either way, you don't know if you're going to get an outrageously good performance or a totally anonymous misfit performance from any of them at the moment. So I would think that there'll be a big emphasis on getting good quality performance out of Musiala at some stage, but where that is, we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. In attack, then you've got Timo Werner, who has looked a bit more like his old self since going back to Leipzig. Serge Gnabry, who looks nothing like his old self. He went from being possibly the best winger on the planet 2 years ago to Bayern fans questioning why he's in the team each week. Thomas Muller, again, he's the captain, or he's the vice captain to Neuer, I assume. Probably the last hurrah for him, and rightly so. For me, I don't think he should still be in the team. Leroy Sané is, I mean, when he's on, he's probably the best left winger on the planet, but you just don't get it out of him every single game. The other options then, Kareem Adeyemi, I wonder if they bring him just because he can be such a potent goal threat. Now, he hasn't had a great start at Dortmund, obviously had the injury and been working his way back in. Lucas Nemechia, who formerly of Man City, now at Wolfsburg, a decent young player, but maybe not proven enough to warrant a spot in the squad for the World Cup. There's a good defence there that if you could find a way to pick, I think you're right. I think a back three would suit basically all of them. Like David Raum, definitely more wing back than full back. Same with Robin Gosens. Same with Benjamin Hendricks. And I think Ginter, Carrere, Sewell, Bella Kotchap and Schlotterbeck all better suited to a back three, to being, in Sula and Ginter's case, the middle one, and in the case of Carrere and Bella Kotchap, the right one, Schlotterberg, the left one. I think Rudiger's more suited to a back three. Klosterman's more suited to a back three. Ka is more suited to a back three. Gunter probably more suited to a four, and Robin Koch the same, but Ridley Baku definitely more suited as wing back than full back. But like you said, I mean, the manager, Hansi Flick, is a back four manager. That's just what he is.
Just had a look at the lineups against England, actually, in the Nations League last time they met, and it was 1-1, and it looks like they played a back three then. Schlotterbeck, Rudiger and Klosterman all started. So unless Klosterman was full back and that was a four with Raum on the other side, possibly they played wing backs then. But I don't watch that game, because why would you?
No, exactly. Well, why would you take?
Maybe I'll take a glance. I'll take a glance this week at the reverse fixture, England Germany, the most dead rubber of dead rubbers.
And like the thing as well, then you play back three, advanced wing backs. You've got your double pivot. You play Musiala, you play Muller, and then you just need one of the others, be it Werner, be it Gnabry, be it Sané. And you've got a really strong team, like a really strong team. But I'm expecting, as you said, the 4-2-3-1 most likely. This is it's a very talented team, and if one or two players in particular, the likes of Musiala or Kai Havertz, really steps up a level and shines at this World Cup, I do think Germany could win the whole thing, because when you can control games as they will, with Kimmich and Gundogan, when you've got that great goalkeeper and a defence that will keep you in games, all you need is one of your forward players to show up and get you goals. And regardless of form, Timo Werner gets goals. Serge Gnabry can get you goals. Thomas Muller loves scoring at World Cups. Absolutely fucking adores it. So there is a possibility for this German team that they could go all the way. Now, I think they'd be an outside shot, but I do have them in my group of teams that can win this tournament.
I have them winning this group, and then I have them potentially meeting someone like Brazil in the quarterfinals, judging by the route they could take. So I think that'll be a potential, whoever wins that one could go to the final sort of matchup. Obviously, by the time you get to the quarters, everybody's predictions have gone awry at some stage anyway, so you're going to get at least one or two odd matchups you didn't expect, but that could be a proving ground, let's say. I don't think that they'll have too many issues getting through the group. Well, yeah,
no.
How far they can go stage. I'm undecided on Germany.
Yeah, they shouldn't have any problems getting through. We will do, before the World Cup kicks off, we should do a pod where we literally do predictions for, group winner, group runner-up.
After the squads are done.
Groups. Yeah, exactly. Once the squads come out, and then we'll do our knockouts and like a bracket type thing and predict our winners. Let's do the last team then in this group. That is Japan. And obviously, they're one of the outsiders in this group, but it's a decent Japanese squad. There's a lot of talent here. They finished as runners-up in Group B of the Asian qualifiers. Players people will be aware of more than anything. Maya Yoshida, formerly of Southampton for a long time. Takehiro Tomiyasu will absolutely be in the squad, assuming he is fit. Ko Itakura of Mönchengladbach, someone to keep an eye on, a quality centre-back or holding midfielder, formerly of Man City. Midfield-wise, Taki Minamino in the mix, of course. There is Rio Hetete of Celtic, who's an absolute joy to watch. There's the Celtic forward two, Maeda and Kyogo. They're both really, really good players. It's a fun Japanese squad, Karl.
Yeah, I really like the look of it. I've watched their last two games now. They played Korea a couple of months ago, and then they beat USA 2-0 this international break. And really, really impressive. The speed of play and the build-up is really good. It's quite a typical Japanese side in terms of what we've seen over the last couple of major tournaments, in terms of it's like technically really good in the build-up, good movement, quite aggressive, relatively small in terms of like not too much set-piece threat, not too much aggression, I would say, in attack individually, but they play so quickly and so on the front foot that it sort of gets around that problem anyway, to be honest. It's quite fluid. It kind of looks like somewhere in between a 4-3-3 and a 4-4-2. They've got a few players there who I think are like easily Champions League standard and could get bigger moves to places. People like Daichi Kamada, who's currently at Eintracht Frankfurt. I think he's one of the most fun non-top 4 or 5 teams in Europe. He's a very, very good creator and goal scorer, just playing off the forward line. I really like Maeda, the Celtic forward that you mentioned. I think he's a good option, maybe not as the actual starter for them, but someone who can either come off the bench and change things or give them a bit of different dimension, playing maybe just from the left-hand side or so. Takekubo is really playing well this season as well in Spain. Minamino, you've already mentioned. Wataru Endo is still like a really, really big player for them in midfield as well. And then they have a couple of people who are not in the squad, like Takehiro Tomiyasu of Arsenal as well, of course, at the moment. Excellent. Yeah, so I mean, they've got players who can come in and be absolutely holding their own against some of the bigger nations and bigger teams that they might face. The best thing I think Japan have in terms of their options to progress in this World Cup is that they are a lot more settled and set in their system and way of playing, and even in the lineup in most respects, than a couple of the teams they're going to come up against in this group. Like, they have much clearer identity at the moment in terms of formation and in terms of playing style than Spain, for example. It doesn't necessarily translate, obviously, to they will beat them because of that, but they at least know how they're going to try and beat them. And I'm not 100% sure that Spain do at the moment, to be perfectly honest.
No, I agree with that. I do agree with that. And I think there's a lot to be said for this Japanese squad. And, you know, they like the US men's national team, they've called up a ton of players over the last 12 months, but it's more of a focus thing where they kind of have a B squad that will play in certain situations where they don't feel like they need to have the A squad, and they'll have training camps where they'll call up players just to have them involved or get a closer look at them. Moriyasu, the coach, has done, I think, a really impressive job since taking over in 2018. Right, that is Group E. So I would say Germany top, Spain second, Japan third, Costa Rica fourth.
I'm going to agree with that, yes, but
is there a possibility that one of the two European countries go out?
100%, absolutely so. And it'll be Japan who can go through. And I was just going to say, I think Spain will do enough. But the last game of this group is Japan against Spain. And I could definitely see Japan have got that win in the second game against Costa Rica, which they should, I can definitely see Japan doing enough to beat Spain in this game. Absolutely shock them. And it might even be that they don't have to, because if, let's say, Costa Rica against Spain in that first match, there's every chance, we've seen it with Spain before, starting a tournament, they have the possession, but they have no penetration. They miss a couple of chances, but they basically don't create enough. And maybe they only take a draw there. And if they only take a draw in that game and then Germany beat them, Japan have already beaten Costa Rica, Japan only have to draw and they're through. Yeah. I think it's absolutely possible that Spain go out of this group.
And the weakness in that Spain team, as we've mentioned, is that not even just it's the defensive diamond. It's Busquets, the centre backs, and the goalkeeper. And the issue being Busquets' lack of mobility, and the centre backs, if they're asked to step out and try and fill that space, they're not the most forceful in doing that. They're not aggressive enough in doing that. There's a lot of hesitancy. And the one thing with this Japanese team is they move the ball really slickly. And they're really intelligent players, and they find space that the opposition has left, and they exploit it. So you could see a situation where Japan just routinely play around Busquets, and Pau Torres has to step out and meet him, and all of a sudden you've got one of the wide players, be it Kubo or Minamino, darting into that space, Daichi dropping in, finding the runner, and Maeda then kind of circling at the back post for a tap-in. You're going to have moments in that game for sure where Japan just pulls Spain apart. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of whether Spain can do the job at the other end. Let's jump quickly then to Group F, because we have spent too long on Group E. Belgium, Canada, Morocco, and Croatia. Belgium topped Group E, and I think will be favourites to top in the qualifier, obviously, and will be favourites to top this group. And I think they're one of the favourites to win the competition. But Karl, this is a Belgian team that has routinely let themselves down at major tournaments, and it is likely the last major tournament for a number of these players. You've got a 33-year-old Toby Alderweireld, a 35-year-old Jan Vertonghen. You've got a 33-year-old Axel Witsel, De Bruyne, and Eden Hazard, the kind of the golden boys of the generation. They're both 31. This isn't a young team anymore. This is a team that has aged in front of our eyes. Dries Mertens at 35, probably his last tournament too. This is their last chance, because this group of players should have had more success. This group of players should have won a major tournament with Thibaut Courtois, one of the best keepers of the generation. Those defenders I mentioned, Alderweireld and Vertonghen, De Bruyne and Hazard, arguably at one point two of the top 5 or 6 players in the world. The likes of Mertens, Batshuayi, Lukaku, obviously, if fit. That is a team that should have, if not won a tournament, it should have got to a final at some stage. I
think that's the real thing, because you got to remember, this group of Belgian players came through after one of the worst periods in their history. They didn't qualify for a tournament in 2004, 2006, 2008, 2010, 2012. None of those tournaments they made. And then this group started coming together, and they were really, really good. And it was like the 2014 World Cup was probably their proving ground, and they sort of showed what they could be in the next couple of years. But it was supposed to be like this World Cup, the last Euros, and even the World Cup in 2018, where they were one of the best in the world. And that's what you say. They've not even come close. They've had one semi-final in all of those. That's not really close, really, considering that they didn't really look like at any point the best team. Maybe the odd game where they looked like they were showing what they were capable of, but by and large, 3 quarter-final places, that was I would say one of those were okay, and one of them were underwhelming, even to get to that stage, to be honest. So it was never the case that this team has shown that they were one of the best on the planet. So I think that not even getting close is the big disappointment in terms of the group. They haven't got a couple of people in at the minute like Romelu Lukaku and that, who we presume would be there if they were fit and available. But even a few of them, like Jeremy Doku, has not quite gone on and done what people were hoping for. Yeah. Probably the same with Adnan Januzaj, who's now 27, 28, something like that, and has never really been anywhere near the required level. Dennis Praet was always a big squad player and has just fallen away completely. And then even people like, goodness me, completely forgotten his name, Yuri Tielemans. Like, this year has been like a really poor year for him. Eden Hazard has had like 3 really poor years at Real Madrid, so they've not exactly going into this with everybody in the best space individually and at club level and everything. So there's a bit more pressure on them, I think, this time than in previous competitions. And I'm not 100% sure I think that they can go anywhere near winning this one either, to be honest. But in the interests of getting through this group feasibly, I would say that I think they will go through this group. And unless you want to say anything else on them, I think there are 3 really, really interesting teams to discuss in more depth.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's move on then to the Canadians. They won the CONCACAF group in somewhat surprising fashion. They won it on goal difference, but ahead of Mexico and the US, who would have been far more highly fancied than them. When we look at this squad in Canada, there are 2 standout talents that are a level above all of their teammates. But there's also some other interesting players. The 2 standout talents, obviously, Alphonso Davies, one of the best left backs in the world already at the age of 21, and Jonathan David, long linked with Liverpool at Lille, who is a proven goal scorer and a quality player. The other one I really like from the squad, who's done really well at national team level but had a bit of a mixed bag of a club career, is Kyle Laron, who, if you remember, was at Orlando City, exploded, did really well, forced a move to Besiktas. It was a disaster originally. He was sent on loan to Zulte Waregem. It didn't go all that well from either. There was a bunch of players who were falling apart in their career at the time. Saido Berahino was there at the same time. He went back to Besiktas and was brilliant for a year. Then he had an iffy year last year and was sold to Club Brugge in the off-season. He can, when he's in the mood, he can really show the qualities that had Premier League clubs looking at him when he was 2021. He's just inconsistent. But who else stands out for you in this squad?
Well, the disrespect to former Liverpool under-23s legend Liam Miller is incredible. There's quite a few players actually in this squad that I like. I like very much the overall improvement of Canadian football and the way that they have put together a group which is not just capable of getting to the World Cup, but we should probably point out this is only the second time they've ever made a finals. It's like a huge, huge thing for them to have finally got there. They've never won a game at the World Cup, never scored a goal at the World Cup, so this will be huge for them. But to come from basically nowhere to suddenly be not just rivaling, but arguably better than the United States at the moment is a major thing. Like, even, let's say, in the Gold Cup, they've had a really gradual build-up from like group stage pretty much every year and get knocked out to semi-finals in 2021. So you can see that there's a real upward curve there. This isn't just like a fluke qualification. They've really put a lot of work into developing a squad. Most of the people that are in the group that are going to go to the World Cup are all like 20 caps and above. So it's a group which has been together for quite a while. They also have a few players who I didn't really realise were still A, playing, and B, not 45 years old, because I'm pretty sure Junior Hoylett was like one of the first people I ever signed on Championship Manager in like 1992 or something like that. So how he's still playing and is only 32 years old, I've absolutely no idea at all. I do quite like Estacio, who plays in midfield with. And then also in defence, we've got a couple of players like Cornelius, who's playing in Greece, I think, at the minute. But like you say, Alphonso Davies is like the big standout in terms of an outlet, and Jonathan David is obviously the main man in attack for lots and lots of build-up play to go through him, and obviously his scoring rate at international level is very, very good as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the best way to sum up the rise of Canadian football is that they've come a long way from when Craig Forrest and Paul Pesky Scalito were the most notable Canadian internationals that any English person could name, and that other than the Owen Hargreaves being born in Canada thing, they haven't really been a notable football entity for a long time, like a long time. Like you said, it's only their second appearance at a World Cup. They were at the World Cup in '86. They went out in the group stage. The plus for them is they'll be at this one. They'll be at the next one as well as one of the hosts. So, you know, that can become a habit for them, that they start to qualify regularly for World Cups and potentially make a bit of a splash. Do you think this team can make a bit of a splash? Because I think this is quite a tough group for them. Morocco and Croatia, all obviously good teams, and we know what Belgium are.
So I do think it's a really good group for them to go in, because it's like quite open, and 3 teams basically could go through if they catch fire at the right time and, you know, are well gelled and everybody on form and fit and all the rest of it. It's a really good opportunity. I should probably also point out the goalkeeper Maxime Crepeau is the LAFC goalkeeper, so they do have like a decent level goalkeeper who's playing for them at a fairly high level, you know, prominent side, all that kind of thing. So I do think that they're well placed to perform well. And do I think that they'll go through? I don't think they'll go through, because to do so at the first time of asking, you probably need one team who you know you're going to be better than, and they could win against Morocco or Croatia if they play perfectly and everything goes well for them. You still probably need a little bit more than that as well, and it's very, very difficult ask to beat both of them. And they play Belgium first is the other thing. They have to, you know, if they lose that game, if they lose convincingly that game, they have to, you know, not lose faith and not be completely down about it and not change the entire team or approach or anything like that. And all of those things are like quite difficult to get on board with if you've had this massive build-up and there's loads of celebration about it, and then suddenly you get spanked 4-0 because Kevin De Bruyne turns up and has an absolute worldie against you. There's nothing you can do about it. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but it will be very, very difficult for them to in the top 2. I think they'll score. I think they'll get, you know, some sort of point from the group, but I'm not going to pick them to go through.
It's a shame for them that they haven't been able to hold on to all of the best young players that were born in Canada. You know, Daniel Jebison, the young striker at Sheffield United, would be a nice addition to the squad as a big, rangy number 9. But the one they could really do it is the guy we talked about right at the start of the podcast, Fikayo Tomori, born in Canada. I know he moved to England when he was 1 or 2, but he could be starting for Canada at this World Cup. And if they had him at centre-back, next to, you mentioned Derek Cornelius earlier on, if they had those two at centre-back, that would be a really formidable pairing with Alphonso Davies at left-back and maybe someone like Alistair Johnston at right-back. That alone could have made them not favourites to come out of the group, but, you know, given them a much bigger opportunity. I'm looking forward to seeing them. I'm excited to see what Davies does at a World Cup, because I think he's just one of the big stars of the next generation. So that should be a lot of fun. Moving on then to Morocco, they topped their group in the first stage of the qualifiers and then beat the Democratic Republic of Congo 5-2 on aggregate to come through. It's not a great Moroccan squad, but there are some exceptionally gifted players here. The most notable being Achraf Hakimi, who after Trent might be the best right back on the planet. They've also got Nazar Mazraoui, who's another excellent right back. Romain Saiss is the captain. We've been watching him at Wolves for years. Yacine Bono, the goalkeeper from Sevilla, he's talented but inconsistent. Some of the midfielders have been around a long time. Amrabat is, you know, just a solid player who on his day can be very, very good. Ilias Chair from QPR, he's a player that always impresses me when I watch him. Now, admittedly, I don't watch QPR very often, but I'm surprised he's still in the Championship. Amin Harat has all the talent in the world, but just is always there's always something off with him. He's always either injured or out of form or the pain in the arse. In attack, you've got Hasim Ziyech, never became the player he was meant to be. Munir El Hadidi, who when he came through at Barca was meant to be the next big star and didn't quite work out. Sofiane Boufal had a disappointing spell at Southampton but remains talented. Youssef En-Nesyri I really like, but he hasn't been in great form for the last year. It's a good squad, Karl, but it's just not... It's not the squad of a team, I think, that can do a whole lot of damage. One other player to keep note of, obviously, is Naif Agard, who should be back, the West Ham centre-back. I do think he's really good. And Adam Messina, obviously, long time of Watford, is another one who could be in the squad, but he's also injured. So there's good players. I just don't know if it's going to be a good team.
I actually think different. I think that the best thing that Morocco have is that they have a really, really good setup. It's not absolutely elite players for sure, other than in a couple of cases, but they have a really set way of playing. They have a very structured build-up. They're very, very aggressive defensively and well organised for the most part. I actually quite like this setup, to be honest, and they're really, really difficult to beat. I mean, the run of games that they've had over the last sort of 2-3 years, in fact, is exceptionally impressive. Since mid-2019, I think they've lost 3 games. One was a penalty shootout. One was to Mohamed Salah scoring one and assisting another in the AFCON in extra time. And then the other one was when they changed shape completely against United States earlier this year and they got beaten 3-0. But most of the time they are 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, sort of variation, or just one off the front man. It's really, really structured. Like I say, it's very, very hard work. And I think Morocco are going to be a really pain in the ass team to beat for any of these sides, to be honest. I can see Morocco being actually maybe one of the teams who caused one of the biggest upsets at this World Cup.
Interesting. I do agree that they're very well organised and they're very hard to beat. I look at that same run of games, and if they beat a bad Ghana team, they beat a bad Chile team. I mean, who else have they beaten?
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of massive talent there because of obviously the qualifiers and the AFCON games early on, at least in the tournament. That's the area of the world that they play in. You can't really do much about that, but it does allow them to be extremely well organised and extremely well set in terms of how they want to play, how they think that they're going to get their wins in the games that they need to. And maybe I would say also the arrangement of the group fixtures. I've spoken about this before. I think that that's really, really important and maybe an overlooked part of the group stage and who gets through. I think this one probably works out in their favour. They have Croatia first, and I think that that's maybe the all-important game in terms of who goes through. Can start well and get a result in that one, then it sets them up pretty nicely, I think.
Yeah, because they get the toughest game as the middle game with Belgium, and then they play Canada last. So yeah, I do agree that the structure of the fixtures does work in their favour. And yeah, I mean, look, if Hakimi pops off and if a couple of the attacking players can show a consistent level of form, if En-Nesyri can be what he can be, then it is absolutely possible that they can beat Croatia or get a draw with Croatia and then beat the Canadians and get through. I don't know. I just think there's a ceiling on them.
There definitely is. I mean, they're not obviously going to
because of how
they're not going to go too far in.
They're not going to win it.
No, but I mean, even like probably in terms of maybe last 16, depending on if they come second in the group. Let's say then you're going to play the winners from the Spain-Germany group. That's probably the ceiling right there and then. But that would also be quite successful for them. I think the one player in the middle who they really need to have a good tournament is Sofiane Amrabat. I think he's a really good central midfielder, ball winner, distributor, everything else. If he plays well, they're a really difficult side to break down. Obviously, they need Ziyech to play well, and he's been playing like some sort of troll who lives under a bridge over the last few months. But I'm sort of banking a little bit on him going, not causing problems, and then turning up because he wants to show himself on the world stage. The one X-factor player, let's say, that I think that they have, and they have to take him and they have to give him the opportunity to play, is Abdi Ezalzouli, who's the Barcelona winger, who's on loan at Osasuna, and he is absolute dynamite. I love this player. He's a bit of a mad thing, and he's obviously not consistent, and he's quite capable of losing the ball in frustrating ways. he is a man. And if they give him the opportunity to play at key moments in games, not necessarily from the start, that's where they can win.
Yeah, he is one of the more enjoyable players to watch in Europe right now, and he's only 20, he's a kid. He is immensely frustrating, but by God, when it all works for him, yeah, he does. Like when he's good, he looks like Garrincha, and when he's bad, he looks like Milan Barros, head down, heading for a corner flag, no intention at all to pass the ball. Like the ball goes to him, and remember that Turkish winger, was it Emre Mor?
Emre Mor, yeah, was it?
Yeah, Emre Mor. Yeah, and it's the same type of like genius talent, but no awareness that he's actually playing a football match with teammates that he's allowed to pass the ball to. You just give him the ball, and he's off and away to the races all by himself. He is extremely gifted, and I really do want to see him. I want to see him play. I actually think now I know it'll be probably Ziyech on the right because putting in on the left foot, but I wonder if he might benefit, if Abdi might benefit from playing on the right with Hakimi overlapping him, demanding the ball off him, and probably giving him an earful every time he doesn't get it, because those two together could form an absolutely unstoppable right side. Like they could be ridiculous together. Yeah, I hope he goes. I really hope he goes. Let's move on then to the last team in the group. That is Croatia. They topped Group H. The Russians finished second, but were obviously then thrown out. Slovakia, Slovenia, Cyprus, and Malta. 7 wins, 2 draws, just the 1 defeat for Croatia. It is an aging Croatia squad in some ways. They're still heavily reliant on the likes of Luka Modric,
the midfield,
Brozovic. The midfield, yes, exactly. But there's a lot of talent here as well. So Josip Stanisic, the young defender at Bayern Munich, I quite like him. Borna Barisic at Rangers is okay. Unfortunately, the Pebble remains part of the squad. So for that, I can never support them. But Borna Sosa, I love at left back. Josko Gvardiol is one of the best young defenders in the world. I like Juranovic from Celtic. Vida, I could do without. So much talent in midfield. Lovro Mayer, exceptional. Mateo Kovacic, exceptional. Modric is an all-timer. Brozovic is excellent. Nikola Vlasic, who hates the Premier League and must just despise the sight of anything English at this point. He's really good. Pasalic is really good. Lukas Susic is an absolute star in the making. Ivan Perisic is still Ivan Perisic. In attack, you've got Kramaric. You've got Petkovic, who I'm not sure he's all that good. Ante Budimir, who's at Osasuna, is a decent player. And Mislav Orsic, who was meant to join Burnley in January, didn't, stayed in Croatia and then destroyed Chelsea's hopes and dreams recently. A good player. Not in the squad for this group, this current group of games. You've got Kaleta Kar, who's a good player. Vrsaljko, who's frustrating, and I think he might be retired from international football. Josip Brekalo, who remains a mystery to me. And that's about it, really. There's a lot of talent here, Karl, but I don't know who's getting them goals at an international tournament. That's the big thing I look at in that squad, and I see a big hole at centre-back, a big pebble-sized hole at centre-back, and I don't see a goal scorer.
Yeah, that's a problem, and it's still basically Perisic or Perisic crossing for Kramaric, and that's kind of it. There's no hiding about this. They're going to be behind the midfield, and that's what's going to win or lose them the game. If the midfield really, really turns up, there's not a lot you can do about it, and you just got to try and repel them when they do get themselves into the final third. And if the midfield is not absolutely on it, or you can bypass the midfield with your own system, you've got a chance. Because as much as I do like people like Gvardiol, I think he's a good player. Sosa's a good left back. There's definitely gaps in that, even on that side of the defence. And the partnerships that they had before are kind of sort of mostly broken down or gone now. For ages and ages, it was Vida and Lovren, and they were like immovable parts of the defence, and it's probably not quite as much now. Maybe they end up playing both of them, but I'd say at least Gvardiol will start one way or another. But they have chopped and changed quite a bit in like the Nations League games and that sort of thing, so it could be quite a new look defence at the very least, and I think that there's probably where they will fall down. I just think that, even if you put, like you just mentioned, like playing Abde and Hakimi on the right hand side, if you're playing them against Juranovic and Sutalo play on that side or something like that, they're going to be cut through over and over and over and over again. And if it's Lovren and even Barisic as well, there's not too much movement and mobility and speed and everything there unless it's in a straight line. So there's definitely ways in behind this Croatia team. I like it how it's set up, but it's a bit predictable how they play and how they try to win games. So it's not necessarily their fault, I don't think, because I don't really see anyone else that they could put in and be an absolute game changer. It's mostly 4-3-3 because they have three really good central midfielders. I'm not really sure where that leaves Bayer, because I know you like him and you'd probably have him in your starting 11, but I don't really know where they would put him in this. It's been sort of Pasalic, sort of the narrow right-sided forward, Kramaric, and then Perisic on the left. That's kind of the typical sort of three attacking setup that they have. Or Vlasic comes in and he plays that narrow right-sided. So there's not really an absolute natural role where he sort of fits translating from club level straight into this international team.
There's not, no. For me, what I might look to do is just go absolutely bananas. Play Perisic at right back and just tell him to bomb forward because he's two-footed. Borna Sosa at left back. Gvardiol and anybody not named Lovren at centre back. Kovacic, Modric and Brozovic as a midfield three. And then Lovromayer and Luka Susic behind Pasalic as a false nine. And just try and, Spain 2010 teams to death.
I think that's too many players, isn't it?
No, that's 11 players.
Did you say
four?
I thought you said back five. Sorry. I thought you put
no. Anybody but Lovren.
Okay.
Perisic as a fullback. No, it's proper fullback.
Okay.
Proper fullback. Don't cross the halfway line. You're wasted up there.
11 out. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, look. It's the last hurrah for many of these players, and I think we can all agree that what we'd like to see is that Dejan Lovren goes out in embarrassing fashion, getting absolutely rinsed by Abdi or by anybody else. Eden Hazard remembering that he used to be great and tormenting the poor fella. I don't really mind who it is. I'm just here to see the Pebble fail, as he has done repeatedly in his career. And then see him do an interview where he calls himself the best centre-back in the world again. That's always fun. No, look, Croatia, there's a lot of talent, but unfortunately for them, it is mostly in their midfield. Like, there's a 7-man group of midfielders there. All of them are very good. I don't think there's 7 really good players in the entire rest of the squad. I think there's 2 defenders, Gvardiol and Sosa. I don't know enough about Sotolo. I don't think the goalkeepers, Livakovic, he's all right. Lovre Kalinic is awful. Like, genuinely as bad a goalkeeper as I've ever seen. And as I said earlier, Kramaric, yeah, but I mean, he's kind of a 1 in 4 type of striker, and you play 3 group games, so the chances are he won't score. Perisic is obviously very good, but the rest of the attack, I'm not sure of. Orsic I do like, but he's never really shown that he's international quality. He's had a bizarre career where he went and spent quite a lot of time in Asia in kind of his prime years or his early prime years before going home.
Even then, though, I'd say, again, there's not really a natural spot for him in this lineup because they play 3 in midfield.
No, exactly. I don't see it. I think Belgium top, Croatia second, Morocco third, Canada fourth is probably what I expect. But it really wouldn't surprise me if Croatia finished bottom of the group, let alone third.
Yeah, this is pretty much what I was saying at the start. I think that there is real openness to this 3 behind Belgium, basically. I do think that it literally just needs one team to catch at the right time, have a really good performance, win a game, and that might be enough, really. You know, you get a draw in one of the others, and you might be through, basically. I think Croatia are actually going to miss out. They look like they should go through. They look like they have the team and the squad, which is a little bit better, let's say, average level of player, which is better than the other 2. I think that that's the case, so they should go through, but I don't quite like the balance of it, and it is really sometimes a bit of a struggle to see them score more than like a couple of goals in a game. They hit 3 against Austria this week, just now gone, Dejan Lovren actually scored one of them, so maybe that's the answer. Put him up front. You solve your defensive woes, he'll score your goals at the other end. And other than that, they don't really tend to score more than 2 per game. But they don't lose very many either. So, again, it is all about that midfield. I think, again, I'm going to say it's going to come down to that first game. If Morocco turn up and really put on a performance, I think Morocco will go through and they beat Croatia in that first match. But Morocco have to be nearly perfect to do that. So if they don't, I guess it's Croatia to go second.
Right, so we will leave that group there. We will leave this podcast there. And we will be back, for those listening, in a few minutes to record the next one. And for those who are listening to this after the fact, we'll be back in a couple of days to do the next 2 groups. Group G, Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, Cameroon, and Group H, which I think is a really interesting one. Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea. So we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.